This week, we'll be looking at gender differences in intelligence, which is obviously a hot topic. Everyone would like to think either that their gender is the smarter one, or that there are no gender differences at all on any cognitive abilities. And of course, it's never that straightforward. I think the most important point for you to take away from this lecture is just how very important culture and socialization are when it comes to looking at differences in intelligence or cognitive abilities. At first, that might sound somewhat strange. Surely intelligence is hardwired or inherited or determined by genes, right? And yes, part of that is true. We know that some degree of intelligence is inherited, and some people are gifted right from birth while others struggle with certain disabilities. But we also know that enriched environments can make it easier for children to learn and to attain a higher IQ later in life. But when it comes to talking about men versus women, well, that's where the environment really makes a difference. Because there's nothing profoundly different about men's and women's brains. Sure, there are some minor differences, but nothing that overwhelmingly would make men smarter. And let's acknowledge that fact right now. It's almost always about men being smarter. Why? Because since practically the dawn of time, work, which required intelligence, was the man's job, and staying at home looking after babies and doing housework and cooking and all that, which surely didn't require much intelligence, those were the women's jobs. And so men were seen as smarter, but the women weren't given the same educational opportunities as the men back then, so it was no big surprise that men were seen as smarter. We'd like to think that now we give the exact same educational opportunities to men and women, to boys and girls, but as you'll find out through the lecture and watching the linked videos, this isn't always the case. We still live in a culture where math is largely a male subject, and this has a tremendous impact on young girls' and women's educational aspirations, as STEM careers rely heavily on a strong background in math. And on top of this, we encourage young boys to play in a way that helps them develop necessary skills for STEM careers, things like building towers of blocks or playing spatially oriented video games. So we end up with a lot of differential gender socialization when it comes to math education, which results in many STEM fields being highly biased towards men. And you'll see how we end up with similar biases regarding women's verbal abilities. It isn't all biological, folks. There are clear ways that culture and socialization lead to adult men and adult women having different intellectual strengths. So when someone starts talking about how men are just naturally better than women at math, or how women's brains are hardwired to be better at language, you'll know better than to be fooled into thinking that these differences are entirely biological. And you'll also know that some of the claims are not entirely true either. Some of these facts are actually quite misleading.